Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you all made it through another day and evening. And so it's Wednesday, February 24th, and we're ready to go. This morning we have Ryan Patch with us, who's the Director of the Water Quality Division over at the agency. And we had Ryan, we had you in a couple of 3 weeks ago, and we're we're very impressed with what you were doing with your ecosystems services program, and so I guess this morning it would be, you sent us an update, and I think the members, the committee has those updates, and so what the question is, I think, is if we give you some money, how soon do you think you could start expending and getting out some of these grants to people, start planning for the projects, and what kind of a timetable are you envisioning with this?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. For the record, Ryan Patch, Deputy Director, Water Quality Division. Appreciate the opportunity to come and share an update about the Payment for Ecosystem Services Working Group and the work plan therein. As stated in the letter, right, Agency of Ag supports the governor's budget as proposed, but has a strong support interest in the working group and how that working group is undertaking a large scope of work to try to make recommendations to the General Assembly to inform the development of a new program. The amount you shared, $250,000, and the timeline for expending that, I could spend some time on the specific recommendations that were put forth in the report submitted by the working group in January of 2020. At this time, it would be about an 18-month budget, with the majority of obligations and the expenditure of that funding would happen, post-July of 2021. It could be feasible to move some funding before the 21st if the legislature appropriated funding for the working group. We have retained a facilitator, but expanding the role and scope of and duration of that facilitator would be some funding that could be expended before July. In addition, the working group requested, travel, which isn't really a thing at this point in time under COVID-19 restrictions, but the honorarium for non-paid working group members, especially farmers that are committing a lot of time to this area of work under the PES working group. So those areas are expenditures that could occur potentially before July. Why the other areas of work under a $250,000 proposal are required deliberation by the working group, a reconvening. There are new members that have been added by Act 129 in 2020, and so ensuring those folks have an opportunity to voice their perspective in informing the types of RFPs that would go out for research and other literature review is why likely would be far more feasible to happen after July, that the working group put forward an evidence-based review of existing programs and modeling tools, a comparison of existing modeling and measurement tools to new and emerging technologies, what for accuracy, cost, and how it can best represent specific, ecosystem service and other metrics therein. And then coinciding with all of that is the economic valuation study, how to price and set additionality standards for ecosystem services. How are we going to ensure that the good work that's happening, there's an additional benefit being brought to the state through a program like that. So those are 3 specific research proposals that would need to happen before we could get to pilot and farmer testing, right? And so that is a reduced portion from the $500,000 proposal the working group sent forward. That was a $250,000 was the bulk of deploying after the research happens, after the consensus is reached within the working group about which tools does the working group want to see utilized to measure ecosystem benefit and natural capital, that would then be deployed. And so that field pilot and those trials would likely happen in the spring of 2022 if the working group's charge is extended, which is in a bill before the House Committee on Agriculture and Forestry at this time. So if those 2 things happen, that's how I would envision that amount of money the committee discussed being utilized and expended by the working group, and in that order.
Yep. So you could, if we can get you some money, you could get started in May or June with some of that planning and getting the group going further. So if you had it, see if it's in the 22 budget, you don't usually get it till July 1 or, the 15th. Well, the summer's half over. And so we as a committee have been thinking about getting you some of this money early on so you can get this group fired up, because, soil health and water quality and regenerative ag and all these things are very, very important to us, but more important even to our constituency who's working the land and growing crops and things. And so we just wanted to get your take on it to see, we don't want it sitting in the office in August and September. We want you to get going with this if we can get you the money. And so committee, do you folks have questions, Brian?
Thank you, Bobby. So Ryan, nice job putting this together. This is strictly, the 250 grand is strictly to sort of set things up and put things in motion and take a look at things. Do you have any sense at all about what we're going to be talking about in terms of a budget to actually do something? I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Great question. One thing to submit before getting to the prospective look at what a program would look like for the state. The working group, we have a facilitator in hand, or we are planning to reconvene in March of this year, and so we'll be hitting the ground running. And if there is, money appropriated by the legislature, that would really focus those first meetings and narrowing the RFPs and working to get those ready to be posted if funding is allocated to this effort. Senator Collmore, to your question specifically, the perspective of many of the farmers and the farmer groups within and others is, within the vision statement, it's a holistic. Look to the working group envisions a system in which farmers are hired to use their ingenuity and know-how in caring for the land to rebuild Vermont's natural capital. And so when we think about the attrition in dairy farms in particular, but other challenges that exist for other sectors, the farmer groups see the valuation of the services they provide to the state for soil carbon capture, as well as resilience to the built infrastructure with their cropland, as an indispensable value that could be lost. And also there's context of food security also, which was raised with the beginning of the pandemic, and is there enough food? So for all of those reasons, many of the farmer groups and others on the working group see this as a critical need to really rethink how farms are compensated for the work they do. Paying for meat, milk, and fiber is definitely one way, but there are other services that are provided. And so as far as scale, how transformative this program could be, is in many ways going to be put to the legislature to think about how to appropriate any funding or how to think about this agricultural system and these additional benefits that are brought. They're numerous and they can be enhanced. They are already at a high level in many cases. And that's kind of the wrangling and why the working group was so intent on doing this background research and planning before proposing something, so different scales of impact could be considered. It could be enormous, it could be a targeted program. That remains to be seen, and that recommendation will hopefully come as a consensus from the working group.
So if I could add that up in one sentence, it's TBD.
I guess.
So, TBD in
That's okay. That's all right. Thank you.
Yeah. Chris?
2 questions for you, Ryan. It is TBD in some ways, but in other ways, it's already being done in a lot of ways in different discrete programs. And I wonder if part of the vision I've always hoped was, that we could sort of get better organized over the myriad of programs that are there, maybe a more clear direction of water quality work, money, funding. There is a lot of money kind of in this sphere. And it'd be my hope that, we would also, as you say, we're learning about metrics, therefore be able to really say, hey, here's some farms that we really need to build soil health in a big way so that they're, less vulnerable to runoff and flooding, et cetera. So I guess the question is that accurate at all? I mean, there, in your vision of where we land?
Absolutely. When we talk about climate change and ag mitigation, the term co-benefits tends to speak to the other benefits derived from looking at ag mitigation strategies. In the state, there's been enormous investment in water quality improvement work, which translates to many of the practices that lead to modeled phosphorus reductions, but could also be quantified for other metrics, including soil carbon storage and enhancements therein. That's not the protocols we have established at this time. We could work to build those. Though I would like to share the perspective of many within the working group that a performance-based system, rather than this discrete practice-by-practice system, which is by and large how state and federal programs are structured, is how farmers want to see quantified their holistic farm impact. And that does speak to a different program and why the working group focused on this kind of whole performance measurement and modeling basis, rather than how can we enhance existing programming, as there are some gaps in delivery that either farmers feel or other holistic stacked benefits you can't quantify by just looking at a cover crop per acre type metric. And so, yes, we're doing this, and yes, there are benefits. The working group and the farmers saw an opportunity for more of a performance-based measurement system that they would like to see as part of a PES program.
Right. And just a follow-up, if I could, are you planning to, or have you already started engaging with the Climate Council at all? Because obviously they're pulling together hopefully a comprehensive strategy, and this would be a part of that, I would hope.
I see a great connection between the Ag and Ecosystem Subcommittee. I'm representing Secretary Tebbets there as its designee, and the subcommittee is working on seating additional members that are not part of the council or the designees. And so there's a strong opportunity there when we talk about the ag mitigation strategies that are needed to address the 12% of ag emissions. A very strong connection and correlation between the research of the working group and those metrics that I hope are shared and understood and elevated between both groups, because I see a real opportunity for one of the priorities of soil carbon storage and the working group, obviously informing an ag mitigation strategy for the Climate Council. And definitely myself, I'm going to be working to bring that information between the two groups and hope that others of the groups will engage in that as well. And I think there is a strong understanding and perspective that, yes, there's a role for agricultural land to do great service for mitigation, adaptation, resilience with the climate change charge before the council.
So other questions, or if not, so I take it, Ryan, that next year, hopefully, when the Ag Agency is doing its budget, this will get you started and run through this 21 year, but or the 22 budget. But next year, when you're putting your budget together, I would hope that you'd have a better handle on what you might be able to use during that following year, the year 23, to really start getting some results from all the, you should be ready by then, right, to really do land applications.
Notwithstanding an acceleration of the pandemic and our ability to continue to operate in this manner, our goal is, yes, be able to move towards piloting the results of this research on farms next year. And your guidance or thoughts on the budget is well heard. Understood.
Yeah. Other questions for Ryan on this particular issue? We should have some clear direction. And I guess you said Carolyn has a bill on her side, over on the House side, and I don't know if they're planning on moving that before crossover. Do you know if they are or not?
If I was to read the tea leaves, it is part of the housekeeping bill, and so I'm hopeful that will be moved before crossover. Yeah, and I anticipate it will move in some manner or fashion.
That sounds good. I think, yeah, like I said, it's really important to us and our constituents that you guys move on this at the agency and get going on this soil health and food security. All the things that you mentioned are things that, you know, we've been working on so far. Well, did you have any questions for us, Ryan?
Not this time, Senator.
Yeah. And if Carolyn gets that bill through, the miscellaneous bill, which usually rolls through pretty good, we'll have you back in and go from there. So
appreciate the opportunity.
No other questions. Thanks a lot, Ryan, for your time this morning, and thanks for putting this forward, through the agency. I think you guys are, on the right track. So good luck.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
So I think we're good to go. Linda was going to, we've got a couple of minutes here before we get started on the food hot lunch program, universal meals. Linda is going to put a note together to send down to approach. So I think in that letter, we would just say that something to the effect that if this is put on the fast track approach bill, that Ryan I believe I heard him say they would start meeting in March, and it would give them, so March, April, May, and they give them a 4-month head start on their project, and would be well worth doing this in the little fast track bill. Is that pretty much the way you guys heard it?
Yep.
Anything else you wanted to add to that? No? So Linda, did you have any other questions?
Not yet.
No?
Not yet. I'll let you know at the end of the day.
Well, Golly, that's a dangerous time to try to get hold of us.
I'll write it up and send it to you shortly.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other issue that we're working on down the hall that we're going to need just to send a note down is on the slaughter and processing stuff. And they were looking, the study that Abby, she's coming in. What time's Abby going to be with us, at 11 or so, Linda?
The agenda says 10:30, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
10:30.
I want to do some more lifting on the universal meals. So we might move that to 11, because basically she sent us a copy of their survey they did with the meat and slaughter facilities. And in their survey, they had some people that responded saying that they could increase output by as much as 80%, I believe, in that correspondence, if they had some help with equipment and reorganizing their facility. And then we also heard that there's new ones that are there new entrepreneurs that would like to do some slaughter facilities, and if they had a little help with planning in that siting, permitting, that they could ramp up production pretty well on those. I think she said 4 new ones, maybe.
Or 7 even, but I don't know if they're all new. But Bobby, what is the state? So what would the money go to? I mean, we all support slaughter facilities, but is it to facilities? Is it to, because I keep coming back to this personnel challenge that we're going to have here.
There would be some for training. And that would go, I believe, they would we can ask Abby about that, but I think they were going to team up with labor and industry and get some joint money to maybe help with the training, as well as for processing, and then money for the retrofitting of some facilities, maybe putting the roller bars down lower for small ruminant animals. It's a combo of many things. And what I've talked about in my other committee in the afternoon is if we had half of this money on the fast track bill, then at least they could get started and they would know that the other half was coming in July, so that one would get finished up maybe in July or August, and then they could move right into maybe giving out some grants or whatever, early on. So next fall, we would have a lot better system in place to keep up with the slaughtering and the processing. That good?
Yeah, thank you. That helped.
Yeah. So we'll have Abby, she'll be along a little bit later to go over all that with us. So I see Faye is right on board early this morning. Welcome, Faye.
Good morning. Figured I'd
Were you-
just log in.
They're gonna let you work alone today, or?
I think I am working alone today. I think Betsy had another meeting. We
Yeah.
don't normally come apart.
Well, it's good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for all the attention you all are putting into this bill. It's appreciated.
Yeah, I've had to hire a bodyguard, No, I'm just kidding. No, it's a great, it's just taking way too much work to do such a good thing.
Yeah.
Usually good things come slow, but golly, there is a limit to it. Hey, we'll be getting started, in a few minutes. Rosie's with us. Do you have, numbers, or should we get those from Rosie in regards to, like, how much does the federal program pay for free meals, for reduced meals, and how many are there, or any of that information?
Yeah, we have some of that data, and Rosie will have that data likely as well. I don't know if either of us have it at our fingertips this morning, but I can work on pulling it up a little bit and seeing what we have for you, but we can follow up. I do know in our different calculations that we've made about what the long-term impact might be on the education fund. We've both factored those in different ways too. So that's something that we can share with you too.
But it seems like we're miles apart on those numbers. And I fooled with them at home here, and I can't get to that high number for some reason.
I mean, it's both how the meals are, all the different factors, each school has different ways that they're different revenue sources that they're tapping into and drawing down federal dollars. And so, the actual budget for a school meal program looks different in each school. And then in the estimate, so I will say that Joint Fiscal Office is working on a fiscal note.
Good.
So we've been talking with them a bit. I'm hopeful that we'll have something at least by the time you all come back after next week. So I haven't seen anything with them, but we've been talking with them. So, but I know, some of the main differences between the agencies at the estimate and Hunger Free Vermont's estimate lie in how we're looking at participation rates based on what's currently been happening pre-pandemic. And how the federal dollars get drawn down based on school meal applications and the ratios. So, we're happy to talk through that with you all, or with the Education Committee, Appropriations Committee, whoever really wants to be digging into that, or if all of the committees do.
Chris?
Faye, you said you've been working with JFO. Who have you worked with over there?
So Mark has been out on medical leave. I think he's coming back in March, is my understanding, and he's who did the fiscal note last year. We've been working with Catherine Burnham, I think her last name is. And it was Chloe, but Chloe just left JFO. And so Brianna is now the kind of person who's putting it together. So And I think she's newer to JFO as a whole. But we've met with them a couple of times over the last month.
Do you feel like there's so many moving parts here?
Yeah.
That I wouldn't want to have to testify on what the estimate was myself. But do you feel confident that they're understanding the moving parts and the dynamics? Because you know, we're the reason I ask is whatever they come up with, unless we can quickly, you know, talk them in a different direction, we're going to be sort of operating with that number. So it's pretty important that we get it as close to our best shot of accurate that we can.
Yeah. So what I will say, I haven't seen what JFO is putting together. What they put together last year, we think relied on unrealistic participation rates and also was not fully factoring in how the federal programs work with drawing down the federal dollars. We've been sharing with them the way that we've calculated and kind of walking them through the data and how the school meal programs work and all of that. So I'm not sure where they'll land. I will say that we, you know, as we've talked about, there's a lot that it's hard to get a really solid number. I feel really confident in the estimate that Hunger Free Vermont is coming up with about the long-term impact. And the nice thing about the legislation is that it's a 5-year transition. So there's time to see how it's happening and make adjustments if those are needed, and to adjust as federal rules change and federal funding changes. So we have developed, you know, the way that we're developing our calculation model can be adjusted as things shift at the federal level, or if, you know, a number of schools move to universal school meals this year, you know, we can factor those in next year. And, you know, and so it's a, you know, I think it's important to remember that the impact is spaced over 5 years, and that we'll have a lot of, we'll learn as we go, and how, you know, and Rosie and the AOE estimate is really looking at, like, you know, if 100% of the kids are participating and no one's filling out the application, which is the, you know, worst case scenario, not for participation. It'd be great to have 100% of kids participate, but we've never seen that at a school. No. And so I think, you know, thinking about ranges is helpful. And that's what we've been looking at, you know, coming up with a number and thinking about it as a range. And so I can come back with many more details about it too.
So I think we have Jim, Ted's with us, and Rob and Jesse and Rosie. So I think we'll have Jim run through the changes that we had asked Jim to do yesterday, and then we'll move right into testimony from you know, people from the agency and get to asking questions. So Jim, are you ready to go through your changes that you did yesterday or last night or this morning or sometime?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Linda, can I share the screen?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. It's right here. Share that. Okay. And let me make that a bit bigger for you.
Yeah.
Come on. All right. So for the record, Jim Dameroy, Ledge Council, we were walking through version 8.1 of this draft bill. There aren't many changes here, actually, because mainly what's happened is just reversing the changes that were made in the last draft, which had struck the first year of the grant program, has been added back. And there are a few other changes. So I'll take you through them. What's in green is what was added back that was struck last time. So it's language you've seen before many times. So all this is a first-year grant program, which is back. No changes from what you saw on the draft before the last one. So this is all familiar.
Yep.
Take this through here. And then we got rid of the exclusion for unique food products. That's gone.
Yep.
And then we changed this date. It was March 31st, got pushed out to April 30. Gives a little more time. We changed this reference to summer food service program at Rosie's request. And then we reversed out the changes that were here. There were 3 requirements before the last draft, and we went back to the original just to promote the program. So we took out the other 2 that have been suggested by Betsy. And that was it, I think, right? Yep, that's it.
Yep. Any questions for Jim on the redraft from the committee? What about from the guest? Any questions in regards to the redraft language from any of our guests or from AOE? If not, Ted, you're with us, and did you get finished up yesterday, Ted, or did you said you had Robert and Jesse with us, and did they have comments that they wanted to add, or did you have new comments to add, Ted?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Starr and Vice Chair Pearson, Senators. I appreciate the opportunity to come back. For the record, my name is Ted Fisher, Director of Communications and Legislative Affairs for the Vermont Agency of Education. And I feel like due to time, we sort of left it somewhere in the midway point. We were talking a little bit about the funding, but I did want a chance to talk about. I brought some colleagues who are specialists in the work that we are doing to address the data issue. And this is something that we've been working on for a while. This has been on our radar screen. We've worked with you guys in previous sessions. So it is something that we are actively seeking a solution to. But we recognize that your committee understands the complexity of this. So we wanted to share a little bit about that process. And really the concern from the agency's perspective about the data is that unfortunately, the link between the free and reduced lunch number has a lot of follow-on impacts, some of which are fiscal, some of which are educational, in terms of our ability to pull down federal money and things of that nature. So we, in terms of we are urging caution and care, and suggesting that the Senate Education Committee and the Education Committees, as this bill moves through the process, should hold hearings on some of these issues and weigh in and work with you on this. That being said, in the spirit of your request yesterday, we can propose some edits to Jim specific to the data piece. Right now, you have a household income form, and if after you hear from us today, you'd like some thoughts, we can provide those concretely to Jim on the back end. But in any case, I wanted to I'll just briefly sort of tee up my colleagues here, and I introduced them briefly, but I have Jesse Roy, who's the Assistant Division Director of the Federal Education and Support Programs Division. This is the parent division of Rosie Kruger's Child Nutrition Programs team. Jesse is also our, and I'm going to mess it up, but our consolidated federal programs expert. His team, he supervises the team that is responsible for the title dollars and a lot of the federal programs, the applications and the processing of that information. So I have him here. I also have our Bob Keeley, who is an education project manager and is currently serving as the acting division director of the data management and analysis division. And these are the subject matter experts in education data collection and analysis. And they're both Jesse and Bob are working as part of this team to try to identify some solutions so that we can move forward into universal meals and still be able to access the data that we need, because it really is critical from an equity perspective, and also for a lot of the federal eligibilities that we are able to pull down accurate data about student poverty. So I'll hand it over to them because they're much more fluent in this, but I will just say that the working group, and COVID has obviously had many impacts in terms of the work that we've been doing and capacity and bandwidth. But this group has been ongoing for many months and probably has a bit of work left to do. And I will say that this is something that hasn't made its way to being finalized internally to the agency and reported up through our executive leadership. So we don't have a solution that is ready to go, as it were. So I'm just signposting that from a perspective. Some of the things that we, if you have specific questions about some of the solutions, they're all tentative at this point because the work is still ongoing.
Yep.
But just
go ahead.
So I'll actually just pass it over to them. Jesse, I'm gonna ask you if you would comment first.
Yeah. Good morning, Jesse. Welcome.
Good morning, senators and others. Thanks for the opportunity. So as Ted has kind of previewed, the AOE supports the intent of the bill. And I think, several of the senators spoke passionately yesterday about the importance that we address inequities through providing nutritious meals to all of our students. There are some downstream possibilities of creating new or exacerbated inequities by not getting this low income measure piece exactly right. And so what I'll do is I'll speak to an example of a sort of a larger concern that exists around this to sort of reemphasize Ted's point that we really want to take some time and exercise some caution and make sure that we get our ideas for a low income metric to replace free and reduced lunch correct. Because as you all know, when universal meals, or if universal meals take effect statewide, we'll no longer be collecting those free and reduced lunch applications in our LEAs.
Now, Jesse, why wouldn't we still be collecting that money for free and reduced meals?
So in terms of parents submitting applications for their students to be eligible for free or reduced meals, there would no longer be an incentive for parents to submit those or for LEAs to collect them. And in fact, I'm not sure we'd even be allowed to, and Rosie can probably speak to that better than I can. But if all students are afforded free meals statewide, that application would no longer have meaning, essentially.
But that's an assumption on your part. In the 80 schools that we already have in the system, are they not collecting these low and reduced meal things from the parents?
If Rosie's on the line, that might be something she can speak to more accurately than I can.
Yeah, I can answer that. So part of it depends on which type of universal meals the school goes to. So for provision 2, the school does collect the application once every 4 years. Once every 5 years, the first year and the 5th year, and kind of in a cycle. But in the intervening years, they're not allowed to collect the free and reduced meal application. And so if the schools need free and reduced meal application information, they instead collect household income forms. And we have varying rates of success with that. And that's kind of one of the reasons we want to stop and study this, is we don't have a lot of really good information on how successful our schools are at collecting those household income forms. And we know that some of them really struggle with it. We know that others, it's not such a big problem. So we need to kind of make sure that if schools are moving to a household income form, or if we're moving to one of the other potential ways of measuring student poverty that this working group is looking at, that those are still accurate measures of student poverty and that can kind of parallel what we're collecting. And so I know anecdotally from schools, some of them, again, really struggle with the household income form versus the free and reduced meal application. And some of them have less trouble with it. But I can tell you, you can't just keep collecting the free and reduced meal application per USDA regulations when you're going into these models. You're not allowed to collect it. So you have to move to some other metric.
So if you collect one the first year and one the fifth year, what about the other 3 years? Do you use the same data you collected the first year for the next 4 years? That year plus 3 more? Or
for the
4?
school meals, sure. For the school meals programs, you apply the ratios of free and reduced children who ate in the first year to the subsequent years. So you're just counting the total meals served and you're applying those free and reduced meal kind of ratios. And so you're not collecting individual information about individual students in those subsequent years. So suddenly you're missing the information that says this particular student is free or reduced status. And that's kind of one of the problems of that. You're missing that information.
And the reason you have to have that is for an audit, or
no. So I'll turn that back over to Jesse to talk about why we might want that particular, because it's actually not needed for the school meals programs. We don't particularly care in the school meals programs about individual students who are free and reduced, but it is actually needed in some of these other programs.
Yeah, Chris has a question before we move back, Jesse. Senator
Jesse, I do want to hear what you have to say. We have 80 districts now that are already doing universal meals. Is that right? Oh, Rosie, you're muted.
Sorry about that. It's about 70 schools. And of course, this year it's all, everybody's doing it. So we don't have, the last numbers we have are last year's numbers. But it's, some of those are independent schools. It's not 70 public schools. It's, right. And most of the folks who are doing it right now are our highest poverty schools. So they're kind of able to hit some of these thresholds for some of the other stuff that Jesse's going to talk about through direct certification and some other measures of poverty, rather than relying so much on those household income forms. So we're not really sure, again, it needs a little bit more study what's going to happen if we move to some of those schools that are overall, there's less student poverty, and we're really kind of dialing in on specific students.
Right, understood. But the 70 schools, after all, that's not an insignificant portion of our education system, and they didn't all come on in the last couple of years. I know in my district it's been 20 years, and so I would like, and this bill doesn't push you to do this in 1 year. So you've asked for time to get it right. So Jesse, what would help me is if you would, anchor your comments in the fact that we've been doing this for 20 years in some significant portion. How many schools do we have? If we're doing it in 70, we're at least what, a third of our schools? Sorry?
I'm sorry, there are roughly 290 public schools in the state, Senator Pearson.
Okay. Quarter.
Okay. So a quarter of our schools.
But again, that 70 includes a bunch of independent schools. I could take a look and figure out, but.
Well, we can quibble if it's 21% or 24%. It's a big percentage, and we've been doing it for 20 years, and this bill gives you 5 years to roll it out. So tell us why that's still not enough cushion for what you're asking, for what you're after.
Sure, and I won't claim, Senator Pearson, one way or the other that it's not. And what I'll do is sort of lay out what a downstream concern is currently, and then I think going forward, this committee or others will address, maybe ways to handle it, and some of the work the AOE is doing. So just to make clear, sort of one of the concrete concerns downstream of making a shift in how we collect low-income data at the student and school level is Title I funding. Now, I'm not sure if folks on the committee are familiar, so I'll briefly explain that. The agency receives from the U.S. Department of Ed about $35 million a year in funding called Title I Part A. So on average, in the coming school year, every LEA takes part, every school system takes part, and on average, they'll receive about $655,000. Now, these funds are used to support students most academically at risk, and that includes a lot of the students I think we all share concerns about in terms of inequity. They're used for things such as academic interventionists to promote literacy in students, extended school day programs for academic reasons, extended school year materials for these programs, etc., training for these teachers and those sort of things. How schools within school systems qualify to take part in these funds is they need to hit a certain low-income threshold. And there's a couple of different ways to qualify, but it's all driven by their low-income rates. And as a state, we've used free and reduced lunch numbers for years and years and years to establish these rates. If we were to move to a metric that we can, I think, fairly safely assume promotes less participation because it's no longer incentivized by leading to free and reduced meals, there will be, we imagine, a drop in the low-income percentages that schools are able to achieve or able to demonstrate, and thus no longer will they be eligible to participate in these really important funds that address inequity, that provide academic support for at-risk students. Currently about 80% of our schools statewide are served by Title I. Some of them are eligible by a razor-thin margin. So if we saw a 5 or even 10% decrease in the number of forms we collect, be it free and reduced lunch or household income forms, we may see, tens of schools sort of lose eligibility to serve these at-risk students with these Title I funds. So that's just one example of a way that there's a downstream effect of potentially not choosing a metric of low income that is at least comparable or as reliable as the free and reduced lunch that we've depended on for so many years.
So Jess, you aren't using the hot lunch program or the universal meals program so that you can subsidize Title I. If Title I is so important to you, why aren't you working on a system of collection of data to cover Title I that would automatically cover the universal meals or school meals program? Why,
Senator,
why lay that all on to the meals program?
Sorry, Senator, I can answer that. We are working on that currently. That's the solution that I referenced earlier. The thing that has been is that historically speaking, and Jesse and others can answer this with more fluency perhaps than I can. Historically speaking, free and reduced lunch has been our most accurate data on poverty across the board, understanding that there's some schools that have been doing universal meals through the various programs. Across the board, it's been our most accurate poverty data. So we have relied on it for that reason. We're talking about a place where your committee is envisioning and many folks are advocating for, and we support the concept of moving to universal meals program. However, we need to find a solution that does provide that data in a way that continues to have fidelity, that continues to maintain the accuracy. Because as Jesse just said, there is federal money at stake, and this is money that schools they do count on to run their programs across the state. So we are working on that. Our intent today is really just to indicate that there is risk associated with this, and that this is a pretty complicated workflow that we have to work through, and we need some more time. We are not at this point sitting in February of 2021 saying we have a solution, if that makes sense. So this is something we're working on. I can't really speak to why we didn't solve it 5 years ago, but we weren't doing universal meal. And well, yeah, true. but when folks were doing the free and reduced lunch applications, and most school districts are doing that, that's our most accurate metric. So we were, of course, using that because it provides that good data. So we need to find a solution on the data side. We're committed to finding that solution on the data side, but as of this moment, we don't have that solution. I wish I could say that we did. It would be much more fun conversation.
So why don't we have Jim add a section to our bill requiring school districts to collect this data, and if they don't collect this data, they can't participate in universal meals program.
So my understanding is that that the inclusion of the household collection form in the current draft of your bill is intended to do that, and we really appreciate that, the intent there. Our concern, and Jesse alluded to it a moment ago, is that is not going to solve the accuracy problem. We are not sure that the household income form is our long-term durable solution for this. And it's for the reasons that Rosie and Jesse mentioned a moment ago, which is there's less incentive on the part of the families to turn it in if it's not tied to food. There's also, and I want to be clear, and this is in our written testimony as well, there's also, we believe, a differential incentive on the part of school districts to collect this. For example, if you, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Rosie, but if you are in your application phase where you're collecting the FRL data, you have a lot of incentive to pull in as many applications as possible in that year. You may have less incentive in, say, year 2 of the program to do so. So you could see a difference in accuracy across one school district. You can also see a difference in incentives between school districts based on their eligibility or their individual status. So we need to solve those issues.
I
Looks
think
like
our
Rosie wants to
our
tell me
concern
I'm
isn't
getting it slightly wrong.
our concern isn't so much that the schools have a different incentive. It's that right now, the schools who are collecting household income forms, we think that different schools are putting different amounts of resources into this. And the household income form is kind of funny because you can't use child nutrition resources, federal funds, on the child nutrition side, to process or send out those applications or those forms to households and process them when they come in. And there's no verification process like there is with the school meals applications. And we don't have a person at the agency who's really dedicated to helping schools do the household income form because, again, we can't pay for it with the child nutrition federal funds. So nobody on my team is really able to help with the household income form because we're paid for with those federal child nutrition funds. So we don't really have good visibility in terms of what schools are doing with this. Are there good practices? What would they need to succeed with this? And so that's where we're just kind of not sure, how schools are doing with it and what that looks like. And that's kind of we just kind of feel blind to this. And one of the next steps for the group, I think, is trying to figure out what schools have been doing and what would be a good model here if the household income form was the metric that we chose to try and use, which in itself is a question. And I think one of the concerns of the agency is that we've, in the bill, in order to address this issue, which, we, again, like Ted said, we appreciate that you realize this is an issue and tried to address it, but you sort of lock us into this one solution. And so potentially giving the agency a little bit more latitude there to continue to explore what the best solution is. And then when we find it, to tell the schools that this is what you need to do, I think is one of the pieces that we're looking for here. And again, I think that would be some of the potential language that we could supply you if you decide that's the path you want to go down, or our recommendation for what what would give us that flexibility to continue this work.
Yeah, Chris has a question, then Ted, and then I'll get to Faye.
I was saying the same kind of thing, Faye, or Rosie, excuse me. And Jim, could we just peg it to, whatever best practice the agency comes up with? I mean, we don't have to name a form. I mean, if I'm a reporter watching this discussion, I'd be tempted to write the headline, Agency of Education won't feed all the Vermont kids because of paperwork. This is ridiculous. And we can dance around this all day we want. But again, we're giving you 5 years to roll this out. It's been around for a long time. So I totally reject the idea that the draft has to get tripped up because of how we identify the paperwork. And I'm confident Rosie and the rest of you can help schools. I mean, it is kind of remarkable to me that this is the very personnel that in the last 10 months, in the midst of a pandemic, have figured out how, in many cases, to deliver meals to houses. We can lean on these people to get this data. There's a cadre of dedicated people who are almost volunteering their time, who will work with parents to get the paperwork we need. I have the utmost confidence. So, Jim, do you think we can build in some flexibility so that Rosie and her team can have an adaptive requirement here that calls on best practice similar to the household income form or the free and reduced meals lunch form without having us too restrictive in case a better solution comes forward? Does that make sense to you, Jim?
Sure, yeah, I can do that. It might be helpful if the agency sent me language that they like first, but I'm happy to draft that. Yep.
I mean, we do this on fuel assistance, and I mean, there's a host of programs that all depend on household incomes statewide. And it just, yeah, it's mind-boggling that we can't figure this one out. And I think we can if we could get a little help. I mean, one paragraph would settle it for me. School districts either fill it out or universal meals program with a big period at the end and wish them well. Ted, you had your hand up next, and then we'll go to Faye.
I think Senator Pearson captured what I was going to say in terms of edits to the bill. We can supply some draft language to Jim. Essentially, you would be delegating to the secretary the determination of what the data collection process would be. That'll allow us some flexibility to work it out as we go through. I do just want to say that we are not trying to not feed kids. Rosie Kruger and her team and the agency as a whole has done an incredible job working hand in hand with school districts during the pandemic to make sure that that's seamless as possible. And I've had the pleasure and honor of having a front row seat to watch that as part of our pandemic response. So we're by no means trying not to find a solution here, but the timing is really critical. So we do want to make sure that this is a seamless transition as possible. So we appreciate the committee's interest in that, and we'd be happy to supply that language.
Thank you, Ted. Faye?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to support what's been said. I think we can solve the paperwork problem, and I'm really excited to see what's coming out of this working group that the agency has put together. And would really, we would really support, the household income form language was proposed because that's what's being used now in Vermont and across the country. If there are better ways, then that's exciting and really great. And so I really like the language, the idea of having language that allows for the best practice, for schools and the agency to be working together to utilize whatever the best practice is and allowing for that to evolve. So I think that's a really great step forward. And I will say too, to what has been said about sort of the 5-year runway with the bill is also that there are schools already going to universal school meals right now. So the work around the paperwork is a needed piece no matter what, and can evolve, as schools continue to move to universal school meals. Again, if this bill is enacted, the 290 schools are not going to go to universal school meals all in 1 month. There will be there will be space. I do also want to just say that, one of the benefits of this is that it removes the incentive or it removes the tie of kids being able to get food tied to families filling out a form. And so I would hesitate on any language that tied the two together in a different way, saying, if schools don't collect the information, you can't do universal school meals. I think that kind of just creates the incentive in a different way. So, I think just there are a lot of opportunities for a new best practice that will work really well and can bring in different ways and different resources of supporting schools and getting high return rates. And organizations like Hunger Free Vermont are happy to be helping with that. And we'll also just note, Jim, as you're looking at the language too, there are two pieces in the bill that address this. There's both the declaration around the household income form, and there's a piece about the Agency of Education working with Hunger Free Vermont, and I think it's the School Business Administration Association. I forget the formal name of it, to check in annually around the best practice, and something around that creates opportunity for folks who are from the business office of schools and folks who are working with schools to be able to provide input, I think is important as well.
Yep. I guess, Jess, we'll go back to you, Jesse. It was a long trip around the screen to get back, but thanks for hanging in there. So we'll pick up where you left off, Jesse.
I appreciate it, Chair Starr. I have nothing else to add. I appreciate folks hearing our concerns around the data piece and understanding sort of the complexity. And while, again, the agency supports the intent of feeding all kids, we just want to make sure there are no downstream effects that actually end up creating inequities sort of on this funding or this service side for these same groups of kids. So we appreciate the flexibility. So thank you for the opportunity.
I think we're all on that same page. It's just that to get there, we're probably, I wouldn't say we're more anxious to get there than you guys because you're doing the heavy lifting, but we want to get to that point, and we've heard from people from New York State, and they seem to be rolling along pretty good over there, and I would think that a little state of 630,000 people with 77,000 school children, that if they can do it, we ought to be able to do it 10 times better. And then we have acre after acre of new farms coming online, growing veggies and meat and all these things. And we need a supply. We've got the supply coming, and we're going to need a place to use that food, and what better place than to feed our children in the schools. So other questions? Did Robert, do you have something you wanted to add in here from your perspective, Bob?
Sure. Bob Keeley from Agency of Education, the acting division director for data. I think much of what you've been discussing is really important. I think the one thing that I've added, that I would add, that hasn't been necessarily addressed, but potentially part of the conversation for that 5-year implementation plan, is that as a state thinking about doing this in the forefront, there is no national guidance on how to use the data for an alternative to poverty. So we in Vermont are like many states in the United States that use FRL as our measure of poverty. And so in moving forward, we'll be going into an area there may be gaps between what the national guidance gives us and what we have to figure out. So having the flexibility to figure that out is important.
Is there, I'll grab you in a second, Chris. Is there, we talked, I believe, last year about setting up some kind of a system between Ed and the tax department. Maybe, I don't know how much we got involved with that, but we talked about being able to pick up these household income numbers right through the tax department. And I'm wondering, has the working group done any study or talking with the tax people if that's even a possibility?
So
as
I can
far
speak
as
to that.
qualifying?
A couple of years, I can speak to that. So a couple of years ago, in trying to figure out how to deal with this particular issue, you assigned the tax department and Agency of Education and AHS to work together to figure out if we could use tax data. And I was the agency's rep to those meetings. And I went into that really excited and hopeful that this was going to be a good solution. And it turns out that because tax data is basically a year behind, and because we use the federal tax fields for so much of our stuff, and those federal fields have, I think, restrictive uses. There was something weird about how we could use certain fields on the tax forms and not other fields. And also that tax forms don't actually collect the names of children. They collect number of dependents, but not necessarily children's names. That made it just not actually a workable solution, which was disappointing because it seems like that's obviously the best way to collect household income information, because we're asking every household to report that every year. But that just doesn't slot into the way the USDA and US Ed ask us to collect household income information, which is current information versus retroactive and looking back on the previous year. So we did that work and we explored it and found that unfortunately that just wasn't a good solution.
Yeah, well, thanks for looking into it. So we've been working on this quite a while then, because God, I didn't realize I could remember that far back. Chris?
I wanted to follow up on Mr. Keeley's testimony and just urge and I guess ask the question of you know, a lot of, we're worried about data mostly because of federal grants and whatever money that comes in based on our data. And I remember a few years ago trying to think through whether or not we had to be wed to boundaries. Like I live in Burlington, some of my schools are universal meals, some are not, you know, and if you could loop together Colchester, Burlington, and Winooski, I bet you could get all districts free and reduced, right? Or universal, I mean, but I don't know that. And looking at this data quandary, we're worried about having a drop off. And I guess I just wonder, are folks at the agency applying creative thought that way? I mean, maybe we should just have a state metric. And just, are we bound to school districts or to schools themselves? Do we have that flexibility, and are folks at the agency exploring it with those kinds of ideas in mind?
I don't know, Ted, is that something that you're up, Rosie's up on it? Because I know we had school districts where they could share numbers last year, the year before, so that Newport could bump off from Troy, or Jay could bump off from, you know, Westfield. So I thought we already had that in place.
So I can speak to that. Go ahead, Ted.
Oh, no, I just wanted to make sure I understand, because between Jesse and Rosie, I think we can definitely consider this. I'm not the right one, but I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking, Senator, which is, are you suggesting that we could use a more regional metric more regional data to apply to all schools within that area or to multiple districts? Is that the nuts and bolts of what you're?
I mean, as I understand it, Rosie, correct me if I'm wrong, you have to hit some percentage of kids that qualify for free and reduced, and then you can be universal, and the feds pick up a bunch of that tab. But it's not even 50%, right? It's 42% or something like that.
So we looked into this a couple years ago, again, because of these conversations in this committee, with the community eligibility provision, which is the more advantageous one for us financially. And everybody right now who can participate in CEP is doing that. So we've kind of got all the low-hanging fruit there. For CEP, 40% of your students in a school or group of schools need to be directly certified, which means their households receive SNAP or TANF benefits, or there's a couple of other smaller categories where we know, using information that's not supplied by the household, that those children are low income. So we looked into, could we group people in a statewide or regional situation to get more schools eligible for CEP, and USDA advised us that we can group any grouping we want within a school food authority. So right now the school food authority is at the supervisory union level. So if you wanted to pursue that further, and we'd probably before doing that want to kind of do some analysis to see if that would actually get us anything. But if you wanted to pursue that further, you would have to sort of force or incentivize schools to move that school food authority level to some higher level, grouping SUs together, or some, it'd have to be kind of a different model of where the school food authority, where that designation lives. And that's kind of how USDA has us manage a food program. And so the school food authority kind of has their budget, and there's some kind of follow-on impacts in terms of how does the local school budget tie into, the larger school food authority entity. So it's theoretically possible to do that, but again, a little bit more complicated. You'd need to make some pretty drastic changes about how we implement food service programs and basically make folks work with their neighbors, which kind of ties back into the whole kind of school consolidation question, which I know is pretty touchy. So that's on the child nutrition side, that particular piece of it. With provision two is based on the school building. So there's not really anything to be gained by grouping folks together. So in terms of that, whether you're talking about Hunger Free's 23 million or Vermont's or the agency's 50 million estimate, and in terms of those funding resources that would be needed, you might have some savings if you pursued that model. I don't think it would be, I would want to do a lot more analysis to figure out if it would be worth the work to do that, and whether we would actually gain some savings there.
Thank you. I just like hearing that there's been some creative thought pushed on it. So
and I don't know if Jesse wants to speak to whether we can do more regional stuff in terms of the other side of things with that metric of student poverty.
Well, the way we should do it is statewide. I mean, we got 620,000 people. Most cities in the United States have more people than that. And, so we should do it statewide, because Wyndham, all those southern counties, I mean, those folks are, and up here in the kingdom, we're all starving to death. So, I mean, if we did it statewide, it would be a lot easier for everybody, I would think. But go ahead, Jesse.
Sure. Yeah. It's a great thought, and something that I'll look into. The DOE, defines for us an LEA, or works with us to define an LEA, and that's sort of where they grant or expect us to sub-grant most of the funds that my team works with, at that LEA level. So in terms of flexibilities in how allocations are determined or how allocations are dispersed, that certainly a great idea to explore it, and it may address, some of these low income concerns. So something I can take up with our partners at the DOE as a question without a doubt.
Yep.
The other thing,
I just want to add a coda to this conversation, in that Jesse just used the term LEA. Currently, LEA is defined as a supervisory union in Vermont. So I'm just seeing us approach the Act 46 conversation from a couple of different directions. So this becomes a sort of a complex conversation, whether you're coming from the title side or from the SFA school food side. But I will just say, and Bob can speak to this with much more fluency than I can, but it is important, again, if we need to unpack the meals and the data questions, but it is important that we collect accurate data for every school, for every grade level, across the state. So we still have, regardless of how we do the qualifications and where the funding allocations are, we still need to collect good data. It has many different applications. We included a very long table in our written testimony that summarizes all of the reasons. We're talking a lot about the funding because it is of a critical interest to the state that we continue to be able to maximize our federal title dollars. But there are other good reasons to be gathering good data, and we do need it for a lot of cases specific to school and even smaller than that.
Have you looked at any other like small state, like Wyoming or even New Hampshire, but their population is a lot greater? How they collect all this data, because they must have to do the same thing we're doing. And have you researched that to see if any of them have come up with a more expedited way of collecting the data that we feel that's necessary to maximize our federal grants money?
Sure, I can take that, Senator Starr. And the reason why flexibility is important is because we do have mistakes to learn from other places, not necessarily states, but from the city of Worcester moved from free and reduced lunch as a measure of poverty to direct certification. And in doing so, caused a period of time that was very painful for that district and for the eligibility of those who were dropped because they weren't accounted for in the direct certification process. So we have been exploring a lot of what this means, and we're I would say in a midpoint now. And the program we're talking about that Jesse has explained is one of 30 that are affected by FRL. So we know that this is important, and we have the same goals, and we're just trying to make sure that in this process of transition, the gaps aren't painful.
Yeah. Well,
I'll speak if you don't. Sorry, Senator. I'll just say that we do routinely compare ourselves to other rural states. Secretary French is fond of saying that, for a lot of education things, the North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming are good comparisons, because demographically speaking and in terms of size and rurality, they are very comparable. I will just note from the universal meals perspective, to my knowledge, and I checked this with Rosie earlier, no state has moved to a statewide universal meals yet. There's other states that are considering it. As Bob mentioned as well earlier, we have many other states use the free and reduced lunch metric. So in a couple of places, we're looking to be pioneers here, and that's not a bad thing. But that is one of the reasons why we're urging caution, because some of these are some pretty complex things that need some solutions. So we're just trying to work through that complexity and make sure that we don't have the unintended follow-on effects that Jesse was talking about earlier.
Yeah, usually when you're first to go, education gets a little expensive because you screw up. Are there other questions from any of the committee members and what we've heard so far this morning? Boy, everybody's clammed right up. Faye, welcome.
I just wanted to mention, I think Robert and Jesse certainly have more information about what is happening at statewide levels as a whole, but I do have information about how each of the states are collecting information in schools where they don't have where they are using universal school meals, kind of what the process is that they're doing. And as Ted mentioned, no state right now has universal school meals for all of their schools. A number of cities do, and have for about 4 or 5 years. There is legislation in California and Massachusetts that have both been introduced, and likely coming in Maine and some other places. California actually has a really similar piece of legislation to what you all are working on, because it also includes local purchasing as well. So there may be some nuggets too that in some of those proposed legislations, and I'm happy to talk to some of my colleagues in other states too, and get a sense of things as well.
Well, it would seem like if we're all pulling this food wagon in the same direction, the hill might be steep, but if we're all pulling it together, that we should be able to get to the top, I would hope. Before we move on, Rosie, could you tell us about how much reimbursement do we get for free meals and reduced meals, and roughly how many we have? Do you have any of those numbers?
I do have those numbers. I don't have them in front of me. Normally, I pull all of those numbers and I have them in a reference sheet in front of me whenever I come before you, and I did not do that today. So I can get you. You were looking for total federal reimbursement and meals served?
Yeah, it would be good to know, just to know if we're feeding, 70,000 children or 50, and how many are free and how many are reduced in the rate that we get from the reimbursement from USDA.
So I can tell you that our current statewide free and reduced percentage hovers between like 36 and 40% of our students. And that does include the independent schools. And it would be helpful for me to know generally, I mean, this bill looks to me like it's only talking about public schools. We do have a number of larger independent schools, particularly the academies, who do participate in our programs. So it would be helpful for me to know. Okay, right now they're not. Well, so that's something you might want to think about.
Those children have to eat too, I would think. And no, like Bella's Free Academy and Linden Institute and St.
Bella's Free Academy is public, but Linden Institute is not. So Linden Institute would not be covered by your bill as it's written right now. And that probably gets into some weird stuff with the education fund. So you probably want to spend some time thinking about how you want to include those folks or not include them, and how you want to do the funding. Sorry, I assumed that you understood that to begin with.
We'll let Campion figure that out. We're just doing the legwork on this thing, and we have the same committee we've had for some time. Down there in Ed, it changes quite steady, and so we're helping them out with this, or causing them a lot of grief. I don't know which way it is, but we're going to get this beat before we're done. So are there any other questions or additions that anybody would like to add at this point in time?
With your permission, Senator, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to come back and speak with you today. And also just to note, and I sometimes sound like a broken record when I say this, but it is of critical importance to us. notwithstanding our note of caution today, as the committee moves forward and as this bill travels on its course, I just do want to note that that the position that the committee has included, if this is to be implementable from the AOE perspective, Rosie's team needs that additional position. So as this moves forward and into the money committees and stuff, I just want to be on record again saying that that is a critical piece for us to make the administrative side of it work. I know because I've been hearing from some of the ed associations that they have some concerns about the implementation side for school districts. If that's something that you leave for your friends down the virtual hallway in Senate Education, I totally understand. But there are those administrative things we didn't get a chance to really talk about today, but they are key issues in terms of making the program work.
Yeah. Well, with the new chair down there and quite a few new members, it's going to be a bit of a lift to get that going. But we've been there before. So Ted, you or Rosie are gonna send Jim some language from the ed?
Yeah, we'll connect with Jim offline if that works.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Well, appreciate your time. We know how busy all of you are and how short of help you are. And French is gonna have to get you some help over there pretty soon. You can't keep getting rid of people and doing more work, that's for sure. Chris?
Just a quick question. Our discussion today has been about the universal meals, but in terms of the incentive around local schools, is the agency think we've got those mechanics, mostly smoothed out? I know it's, it is a burden, so I don't want to overlook that. But in terms of being able to pull that off, does the language work, Rosie and others?
Yep. So I feel like the language is workable. Again, I need that position. I mean, right now the position in the bill covers both pieces, but I need at least some amount of a position to do the grant program piece of it. So if that were to break off and move on its own, I would hope that at least part of a position would stay with it.
Anything else? If not, thanks a lot, you folks from the Ed Agency. Certainly appreciate all the work you're doing and have done in regards to this issue. And hopefully someday we'll accomplish our goal. So again, thanks. And we will only have that one change so far that you're going to forward to Jim. And I don't know just when that will happen, but we'll make sure and notify you if we work on this again, this week. It wouldn't be until probably Friday. So we'll keep you informed. So thanks a lot. And so now, so we have Abby coming on board. I don't know, I guess, is Abby with us already? We could take a little 5 or 10 minute break if you'd like.
That would be
Could
great.
you wait, Abby?
Absolutely, of course.
Are you right out straight, or can you wait for 5 minutes?
I'd be happy to wait for you to take a few moments.
Yeah, we'll just be quick and say 5 to 10 minutes and we'll fire back up. welcome back, folks, and welcome, Abby. Good to see you and have you with us. We just need to go over the slaughter and processing draft a little bit. And what you sent us a lot of information and updates on your, I guess, on your survey you did earlier, well, the end of last year, I believe. And what, I guess the question that we have, it's not a very heavy question, is that we have a fast track approach bill that we're working on. And if we could put, I was thinking like half of your request into that fast track bill, if you could get working sooner on your program or the programs to help slaughter processing, so we could get started sooner. So possibly there would be some additional facilities online by this fall when most people do a lot of animals. So that's basically the question.
Great. Good morning, Senator and committee. Abby Willard, Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I appreciate that idea, and I think acknowledging that the slaughter and processing community is really busy in the fall is an important consideration around how to expand capacity in these facilities, meaning we would need to explore investments prior to a September, October, November application timeline. Based on some of the conversations that we've had with the industry as well as with our meat inspection section, we would, if in a position of having additional resources to invest in expansion projects, a two-phased project, which would include the first phase of working with facilities and offering technical assistance and design planning support to help facilities determine what equipment, what retrofits, what expansions, what redesigns they may need to be able to increase animal throughput and processing capacity. We've spoken to a few facilities that are in that phase already and have done that work already. So I think there is a possibility that if a facility had a plan now already, that they could move into the kind of procurement or infrastructure phase of the program more quickly than others. So we imagined that, if there were, I don't think that design and planning phase of the program would take more than, 300,000, 400,000. I mean, it's just sort of an estimate of what it would take to hire contractors, designers, and consultants to be able to work with these facilities to draw up plans and make sure that they had real viable designs in place before we made significant infrastructure investments in them.
What we were thinking is something in the neighborhood of 300,000 to 500,000, and then because it can certainly carry forward. It isn't like some programs that we've had in the past. You had cutoff dates, but this, if you had some left in July 1, it would just continue on with the balance of the other monies that hopefully we're going to be able to get into the budget. So we could move to phase 2 much sooner if we had this in the early budget bill.
Yeah, and even with the
portion.
phase two, we were thinking, doing a request for proposals that would be released in July, so very, very early in the new fiscal year, so that facilities and establishments had July and August at the late, maybe even just the month of July to apply, and could even begin construction or renovation or purchasing of equipment in August and September, so that they were in, some of these fast-tracked situations of being prepared for a fall season. So, in a facility conversation just yesterday, there are facilities that are booked out for slaughter and processing into 2022 already. So this industry is sort of struggling to sort of keep up. They acknowledge that with some modernization, with some expansion, with new equipment, they can increase throughput and they can process more local meats. We just need to give them some of the support to get there.
I think, did I read in some of your literature that you sent us, one place said they might be able to increase it as much as 80% output, which is quite a bit. That would be most helpful.
Sorry, Senator.
We all just talk at the same time. We'll all get there. No, I mean, 80%, that's a real sizable number for, just some odds and ends and revamping a little. One question, Chris had a question, I think, earlier in regards to meat processing, like working with to get people trained. And I thought we had talked some time back about teaming up with ACCD on labor training dollars to help processing, that people could learn to process how to cut and wrap and all that. Chris, you want to elaborate on your question a little bit?
Well, you've asked a different question than I'm asking, but it's an interesting one. So that's a workforce issue, and maybe Abby could comment on that.
Sure. Yeah. Let me just, I want to address the capacity expansion, and then I could do the workforce piece. So we spoke with a facility yesterday that's currently processing between 35 and 40 animals per week, and they're saying they can double their capacity to 75 and 80 animals per week with an expansion project that they have designed and sort of ready to go. They also could increase throughput by adding in a smokehouse and offering a diversity of product smoking, sausage making. So there's some additional value-added equipment that they would purchase. And we kind of asked, and they said that they currently employ 9 full-time, part-time employees, and with the expansion could add 7 to 8 additional, some part-time, some full-time employees. And they just made a really wonderful connection to, making an investment in this industry is also an investment in keeping our agricultural land working and operational because of the number of animals that can then go through the facilities. So anyway, really great kind of metrics to be able to attach to this type of a project.
Abby, just to interject, is that story coming in through Working Lands?
It actually came through a conversation we had with a facility yesterday. So they're one of those facilities that is not the circumstance for all slaughter and processing facilities, where they have already started working with a consultant and have a design plan in place of what they'd like to do on their existing footprint and expand the capacity of their facility. And was actually part of the conversations that we've had to say it would be really important to be able to make sure that we're making wise and thoughtful investments in these industries, to have that design phase first, have a real plan, be able to show what the throughput increase would be, and then be in a position to make capital infrastructure investments. And we asked them, if you potentially received $750,000 through state funds, possibly matched with $250,000 or $200,000 that could come from the USDA AMS meat processing capacity, so somewhere around $1 million, even though your project cost in this particular case is in the 3 million plus range. They felt that given the private investment conversations and other lending discussions that they've had, $1 million in grants would be what they need to be able to bring a project to fruition. So again, just giving us a sense of like, are we in the ballpark with the resources that we can provide to get some of these expansions, innovative modernization projects through? And it sounds like, at least in some cases, yes. We did talk about labor, of course, so acknowledging that if you're going to double your workforce, this is where some of the early stage discussions that we've had with Department of Labor have been really critical about them being able to step in and offer some on-the-job training, support facilities financially to be able to do on-site training of new, kind of building that skilled workforce of meat cutters. And Department of Labor is interested and engaged and sort of wants to work with this meat slaughter and processing community, acknowledging that there's potential there. So I think we have some connections and some real opportunity to work on the labor and skilled workforce side.
No, that sounds good, Abby. And of course, we're putting 10 million or so into CARES money into these businesses that, for whatever reason, didn't qualify previously to get any help. And I think it'd be most important to encourage any of these slaughter facilities to apply for that new money that we're going to be approving in the near future, so that maybe there's some there that would, qualify, and it's going to be important that they really get help and get that in early, because there's going to be a lot of people scrambling for that little pot of money. So that would be helpful too.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point, Senator. The coronavirus relief funds that came to the Agency of Agriculture and what we called our VCAP program, we funded 5 slaughter and processing facilities with those funds, but only 5. And that was because of the way that the coronavirus relief fund language limited the scope of those investments. And so those grant awards had to be for economic harm that was experienced or additionally incurred costs by those businesses. And frankly, I think many of the slaughter and processing facilities did well during the pandemic because the demand for their services is so high. And so if future stimulus funds have a focus on kind of this recovery phase and helping businesses pivot and grow and respond to consumer preference changes and new market channels, and kind of this new focus and expanded focus on local food, that I think creates an opportunity for many more slaughter and processing facilities to access those federal stimulus funds.
Yep.
So
Chris?
one additional thing sorry.
Well, go ahead, Abby.
I just wanted to say one additional thing on the workforce and training side. So we continue to know that it's great that some facilities want to offer on-the-job training. This is where another part of a proposal that we might put forth with access to additional resources for the meat expansion projects would be looking at educational institutions that want to create a more permanent education site and can offer meat cutting courses and trainings, have access to equipment and a space on a college campus, likely. So again, those courses have been offered in the past and they're occurring right now. But one of the greatest challenges has been finding a slaughter facility that has space and capacity to host the trainings. And because they're so busy trying to process animals, they're not in a position to host trainings. And so that's another aspect, I think, of this project that could happen prior to July 1st, is sort of do some sort of a simplified bid to educational institutions that may want to create that type of a training center, purchase equipment, and do a program like what's happened at Vermont Tech.
Yeah, is that what you kind of had in mind, is to get that back running, isn't there a slaughter facility in Sharon or
There's
down
a
in?
facility in Sharon and one in Braintree, both really close to the Vermont Tech campus. And I think they've done courses in at least the Braintree facility in the past, but the challenge has been, again, now how busy they are and being able to kind of close their facility for an educational day as opposed to actually processing at full capacity the livestock that are coming through. So the concept of creating education center that could do it is, I think, an alternative.
Well, that would certainly help the college as well. I mean, so you gain, they need students and they need to train people. And so it would help them, help the slaughter facility create more jobs statewide, hopefully. And I know even the stores up north here, they seem to constantly have ads in the paper for meat cutters. And so, it's a good, I'm glad you're working on that, and hopefully something good will happen. The other issue, the President Pro Tem from Southern Vermont, very interested in small animal slaughter, goat, sheep, things like that. Do we have a facility down further? Like Carolyn has to bring her animals, I think, all the way to Sharon, Vermont to be taken care of. Is there any facility down in the southern part of Vermont, do you know of?
Yeah, so the Westminster facility does process small ruminants, and they have processed, a large volume of sheep and lamb and goats in the past. I don't know what the facility's kind of current capacity is for taking on new clients, or if they're still doing 600 lambs a week, which was the report that we got from a cheesemaker, a sheep cheesemaker in southern Vermont earlier last fall. So yes, there are multiple facilities that do have the capability for processing small ruminants. I think the question has been, as we've discussed in the past, when the facilities are faced with such a demand for their services, are they processing sheep and goat that take longer and have a lower cost per pound return to the facility, or are they replacing those appointments with beef and pork appointments that are more lucrative? My understanding of Westminster, and it might be interesting to actually have some testimony from these facilities themselves, but my understanding from that facility is that they have done a lot of halal processing of goat. So again, they do the slaughter, but they're not actually doing the processing, which is more of the time-consuming stage. So then they're passing the animal on to their customers to do the further processing. So I think there are options. I think the question is just everybody's really booked, and I think some appointments are being canceled to be more focused on larger livestock.
Chris?
Two questions, Abby. And any strategy, since we are talking about using state dollars and funneling federal dollars to promote meat processing, any thought of a strategy to ensure that it's not all beef and hog? Because I don't know how we measure the demand backup, but we do hear consistently from lamb producers, even chicken folks, that there's a real challenge.
Yeah. I think anytime we do a granting program in the state, we have a really rigorous review process, very transparent, open application period, and have some sort of criteria by which we're evaluating applications that come in, because we've never been able to fund all the applications that we've received through Working Lands or other grant programs because the subscription to our programs are so high. So I could imagine that we, in addition to wanting to see that a facility has a design and a plan to increase throughput and local meat processing. We could add, we could consider a criteria around capability for small ruminants. I don't know that it would be the sole criteria that we'd want to include, but I think it would be nice to include that and hopefully see a mix of applications come through.
Okay.
I think it'd be very important to have that in there. Yeah.
And then back to the workforce, I'm heartened to hear that, that's part of the strategy. My question though was about the agency workforce, because we talked about this and I'm still trying to make sure I understand, but state workers have to be present for slaughter, right? And so if we expand the facilities, which we all want to do, and expand the hours at current facilities, we need to have our own personnel there. And are you confident we can handle that? What's the plan for that? Where's the funding for that? And the timing? Can you just help us understand that?
Yeah, there's one position I think that's already underway in the position pool to add an additional meat inspector. I think you're wise, Senator Pearson. There will likely be additional position needs if we see slaughter happening at more facilities, more days of the week. It may be that some of these projects are just about increasing efficiency and flow and throughput, but not necessarily adding additional slaughter days. So right now, it used to be that slaughter was, I think I testified on this last time, and I think we said that normally our plants slaughter 2 to 3 days a week, and we're now slaughtering 3 to 4 days a week. So that does mean that there's at least one additional day a week that we have to have inspectors on site. I think there's the possibility for, going to 5 days a week in certain circumstances, which would add additional staff. I think there's the possibility of some of our custom facilities coming under inspection and then being required to have an inspector on site for slaughter. I think some of those are accounted for an additional position, but not all. So I think there is likely the need for kind of a continued evaluation of the staffing capacity at the agency to be able to meet the slaughter and processing kind of inspection requirements.
Do you have the flexibility in the pool, or are we going to see you in January screaming in on day one? Oh my God, we are the cause. This is my fear, that the state becomes the
bottleneck and shame on us. I mean, if we're investing dollars to promote slaughter facilities and then we don't carry our own weight, so I just worry that do you have the flexibility, if indeed the demand is there, to fill that within the vacancy pool, or should we give you that flexibility? That's what I'd like to really be clear on. Yeah, I appreciate the clarity. I don't think that I can adequately answer that question, unfortunately. I think that's a question that we can get back to you on, either from the Secretary or from the Food Safety Consumer Protection Division, where our meat inspection section is located in. I know there's been that the one is feeling very secure. There's been a possibility of a second, and then this is where kind of to your point, would we be back again in January? And I can't answer that question, but I know that we can get you the answer, or at least to the best of our knowledge, based upon what facilities would come online.
I'll grab you in a second, Brian. I haven't told you guys this, but we got another 40 farms gone, We're down dairy, we're down under 600 now. And I would expect, I haven't talked with Anson or the crew, but I would expect that if those numbers don't level out pretty soon, there'll be some inspectors that we could retrain from different parts of the agency to pick up this slack and be meat inspectors in the future. But I just found that out yesterday. That's why I hadn't passed it on. But cross inspection, Anson's talked with us about cross inspectors being cross educated so they could do that. So, there's room there. So Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. And that's not good news at all, for sure.
No, that wasn't good.
Under 600, who could ever have imagined? So just to follow up on Senator Pearson's question a little bit, Abby, when someone expands their slaughterhouse operation, I'm trying to get a sense of the added meat inspection requirement. Can the same person just stay on longer if they're processing to a greater degree in terms of adding hours? I understand if a new slaughterhouse comes on, obviously nobody's going there now because it isn't there yet, and that would require additional staffing. But say somebody expands their physical footprint, does the inspector have to be there exactly when a particular animal is processed, or can they just be there and that counts as sort of having somebody there? You know what I'm saying?
I think I do, Senator. And again, I'll answer to the best of my ability. Again, this is where our meat inspection section that do this every day and are actually the ones in the plants would be probably better able to answer your questions. But my understanding is that per the state kind of being equal to the federal program, we need to have a state inspector or federal, if it's a federally inspected plant, observing slaughter of every animal in that facility.
Yeah.
For processing, that's not the case. We do not need to be on site watching every carcass be kind of processed into cuts or ground. So many facilities might slaughter in the morning because that means they usually get animals at the end of the day or first thing in the morning. They hold them in a pen. They then drive them through into the kill floor. And then they do that process, the stun gun or whatever that looks like. Then they hang the carcass, they skin it, and I think it hangs for a period of time, and then they cut it up. So I think they generally are slaughtering in the morning, and so the amount of time that they slaughter in the morning that maybe could be increased, or the number of days a week that they do slaughter could also increase. More than 2 to 3, or more than 3 to 4 days per week. Each of those slaughter time, and I think that most of our inspection staff are typically in one plant a day. Sometimes they can go to 2 plants in one day to either watch slaughter in the morning and then check in on their HACCP plan processing practices in the afternoon. But they're not traveling to multiple plants within a single day very often. And again, this is my general understanding. So there's folks in our agency that can give you very specific answers. But I think some of the expansion projects, so again, the facility that we spoke with yesterday, they were saying they would want to double the capacity of their coolers because some of their bottleneck is, they have the hanging carcasses, they can only fit so much in the coolers to bring the body temperature down to where it needs to be. Or they want to add some of that additional value-added processing capacity to make sausage or smokehouse. So that's an additional footprint, which again, we don't need to inspect the smokehouse activities to the same degree that we do the slaughter activity. Having freezer storage. So then once everything is packed into the boxes and waiting for the customer, that then goes into a freezer. And again, that has been a bottleneck for some facilities, is that they can't cut up any more animals because they're out of freezer space. And then they even talked about having kind of like dry storage, for their spices or the boxes or the, whatever, just additional space for kind of the work of their industry. So not all expansion means that they're necessarily going to slaughter more animals per day. It may or need substantial more inspection assistance, but some may. Again, if they're going to go from 2 days of inspection to 4 or 5 days a week, that would increase the inspection capacity of our agencies.
Thank you.
Other questions? Only, I have one about, have you, or do you know, probably this is Anson's question. Have you worked in ag development with any of the people from Mass or Southern New England on whether or not they would be interested in purchasing beef and meat from our places? Or do you know if that's up and running? Or I'm looking, we've only got what, 600,000 people, but if we tapped into that Southern New England market, because we've got wonderful grassland and can grow excellent beef, and there's a big market there if we could tap into that.
Yeah, so Senator, I think a couple of things there. We did hear from the facility we spoke with yesterday that they are getting inquiries from producers outside of Vermont for slaughter slots and processing slots. So there's that opportunity of the animals coming to Vermont to be slaughtered or processed and then go back to other New England states or Northeast states, bringing their revenue for the processing here. There's a fair amount of effort and a lot of priorities, at least in the Ag and Food System Strategic Plan, about reaching the metro markets. So acknowledging that we do have a finite population in Vermont, even though it grew substantially in the last year, where that is a focus of our marketing expansion efforts, is to get more local product both promoted and marketed outside of the state boundary, but also explore partnerships. So one of those has been around farm to institution. So there's been conversations of how do we get Vermont products into UMass kind of college system, which is a big system. It's been kind of on hold or more of a challenge in the past year due to the pandemic, but there are a variety of active efforts to sort of get Vermont product to consumers outside of Vermont, as well as look at some of those institutional markets, which ground beef would be one of those primary products, for example.
Sounds good. Other questions for Abby? So just to sum up where we're coming from, we need to send a note down to approach on the availability and the timetable for getting some money out if we get this in the early budget bill. So you could almost start immediately upon completion of that bill. If you got that money in March, you could pretty much set up and get going to advance these projects. And would that 300,000 to 500,000 be adequate, Abby, to get you through until July 1, when the rest of the money would be hopefully flowing?
I think it would be. I think we could imagine about $300,000 spent before July 1 on this planning, design, and consulting work with facilities to put in place a plan for what their expansion, retrofit, or new equipment purchase needs would be, so that they have a design ready for then a July RFP that could be focused on infrastructure improvements and expansions. Additionally, I think there's about $300,000 that we could invest in this worker training and creation of a training center that doesn't need to wait until July 1. So we could put out a simplified bid to educational institutions around creating a workforce training program and meat cutting training location, and that project could begin prior to July 1. So I would say somewhere between, so that's between, up to $600,000 was sort of our general estimate of what realistically could be advanced in the next 5 months.
So we could bump that from 400,000 to 600,000 then, and you'd be safe, you feel you'd be safe in putting these grants out or jobbing it out.
Yeah, and I guess the only kind of clarification I would ask is if those funds could be rolled over into either the phase 2, which is the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So, whatever is unspent in the planning design or on this education center and workforce training piece could be spent on the actual cost share grants that would go to facilities.
Yeah, there would be no time limit on that. It would just roll right into, the other program or whatever you come up with. The other question, over on the House side, they got all the money rolling in working lands. And I think we've talked about keeping this money separate from that to speed up the process and cut down on the red tape, so that you can get these things done and out the door and in progress without having to, get RFPs and all the work that this is a particular subject area that we should be able to, you guys should be able to handle that without going through working lands. And then maybe in the future, the other money would come through working lands, but you would have the authority to move the money around.
Yeah, so on that point, Senator, I think we could work with either scenario. I think it may be a bit more expedited to run both the phase one, the phase 1 of the planning and design phase, as well as the education center through the Agency of Agriculture and not through working lands. But I think we could also do an earlier RFP process through the working lands program as well. So I think we're equipped to kind of work with either scenario, just acknowledging that when we engage the board, there is a process and a little bit more kind of consensus generating that occurs through that process, which has been a great process, which we respect and appreciate. So either way, I think we could make it work.
Yeah, sounds good. Any questions from any of the members for Abby? Well, thanks a lot, Abby. Chris got a question.
Well, yeah, just since we have you and maybe it helps us limit your need to come back. The discussion we've been having on incentivizing local food and school meals. I think you've been plugged into that discussion, and the draft is largely like it was last year in terms of that section. But I wondered if you had any comments or anything we should be watching for. And Betsy tells us that you've been very helpful, so thank you for that. But any comments, anything we should know from your point of view?
Yeah, thanks, Senator Pearson. It is I think as I testified a few times ago, I think it's a good time for this local incentives bill. I do appreciate and respect the fact that we do need, or the Agency of Education in particular would need the space and time to sort of bring on staff to be able to stand up a new program and initiative like that. I think the conversations that we have been a part of is that the Agency of Agriculture sees ourselves in a support role. We don't have the same day-to-day or month-to-month engagement with every school in the state as the Agency of Education does, but that we do see ourselves in a position of providing education around local procurement, supporting school food nutrition staff in kind of tracking their local food purchases or answering questions around the local food definition that was modified last legislative session. So we do have a staff person that manages our farm to school grant program and does our farm to institution work. And Trevor Lowell, he has a great relationship with schools and with the Agency of Education. So I think we do see ourselves being a partner and an additional kind of hand in the program, acknowledging that it's the heaviest lift for the Agency of Education. But,
Thank you.
welcome.
Yeah. Anthony?
I'm just really glad that we're making progress on this meat processing thing. It's been a long time coming, so I appreciate the progress we're making. I hope we get there.
Yeah, me too,
We're
Senator. Thank you.
We're gonna get there. Don't you worry. The motor's all running. It's all we got to do is put the bus in gear. Well,
I'll just echo what Senator Polina says. I appreciate your work, and let us know what you need.
Yeah, thanks, Senator Parent. I will reach out to the Secretary and to our Food Safety Consumer Protection Division to just acknowledge the fact that I was not officially able to answer the question around what staff capacity might the agency need as we increase facilities. So
yeah, we'd like to get that by noon if you could get it to us.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
And for my part, more than hearing, you need 1.5 staffers, I want to know that you have the flexibility already
Yeah.
so that you can quickly respond. I mean, if we have facilities open in October, but for a state inspector, that's going to be very unsatisfying.
Agreed. And I just, for clarity purposes, our message thus far has been that we are not the bottleneck at the state, and we don't anticipate being that bottleneck. But I agree with you. I too want to just confirm that we do have the flexibility or the resources or the mechanism to kind of bring forth the positions that we think we would need. But yeah, so far that we are aware and certainly don't want to be in that position as well.
No, you guys did a heck of a job with the COVID money, getting that out. It was timely, it went very well, and I'm sure you'll be on top of this. If there are no other questions, thanks a lot, Abby. Appreciate all the work you do for us, and hopefully we'll get you some coins coming your way so we'll get this slaughter facility beefed up, and if
No pun intended.
yes. And if as you go forward, we're planning on getting out of Montpelier the second week in May, and the budget bill is usually the last bill. And if you bump into roadblocks and things that you feel we should know about that needs a little extra money as far as this issue goes, or if you're don't be shy about letting us know.
Yeah, I mean, this always gets to be a delicate dance for the administration, as you know, but I just want to reiterate the value and appreciation for the Working Lands Enterprise Board and Initiative and the governor's kind of one-time $3 million. I continue to believe that program will be oversubscribed again this year, probably regardless of what the budget is for that program. And while meat slaughter and processing is of paramount importance to us and to the industry and as a sector that needs some advancement, there are many, many other businesses that look to that program to guide their growth and their innovation and their kind of opportunities for reaching new customers. So I just don't want to lose sight of the fact that that's a program that kind of has been underfunded probably many times over based upon the demand that we receive in applications.
No, that has worked very well, and and the house is very protective and bullish when it comes to working land. So all we have to do is tag along and add to it if we can find some money.
It's a good relationship to have, yeah.
Yeah. Anything else from any of the committee? If not, thanks again, Abby. And again, we appreciate all your work, and don't be shy about letting us know if you need something.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for all that you do as well.
Yeah. So committee, we'll get that letter together. Linda, are you on?
Yes.
And do you have what you need to throw that together, send it down to approach?
I've got a rough
Or-
draft that I'd like you all to
send it-
look over.
Yeah, no, that would be good. Is there anything else that we wanna ask for in that early budget bill? Have any of you thought of something that we may have forgotten? No?
So we've got slaughter money. We've got
That-
ecosystems.
Yeah,
We've got, what else are we asking for?
I think it's mainly those are the two big issues. My cat wants to get on Zoom with you guys. I don't know if she wants me to go feed her or what. Yeah, universal meals we don't need to do. The chicken bill's good to go, gone. Ecosystems, farm labor housing, I don't know about yet, but we're gonna have Gus come in Friday, hopefully, along with Michael, and try to put a deal together right with Gus. Maybe just it's all, we don't need to do a bill. He's got millions for housing, but to try to figure out a system to use that federal farm labor housing program to compensate. And the only thing I was thinking about that, remember Michael told us that there's a cost sharing type deal with that US farm labor housing thing. And whether we could use, Gus's money, some of that's federal, a lot of it's state, where you can't usually use federal money to subsidize or cost share federal money. So that's the deal with Gus, trying to figure out if he can put a program together using state dollars to match the federal dollars. And so we might have to go to approach on that issue with just some language change in when we put the big bill together. But I think we're in pretty good shape. The worst part of our whole freaking deal is that universal meals, and it makes no sense that we keep tripping up over damn paperwork. I would think that we could figure that out.
Too much red tape.
Pardon?
There's always too much red tape.
Well, if you get rid of usually some lawyers, you don't have so much red tape. And, somebody has to be boss. It don't matter whether it's us in the legislature or at home in your own business. Somebody has to be in charge and bite the freaking bullet. You can't hem and haw and take months to go through committees to get things done.
We could fire a lawyer and hire some interns that could go door knock and talk to the parents and fill out the form. It is really a question of, do we want to get to yes or no or not? And very frustrating, but I hope we'll push on and work a little bit with Corey's old committee down the hall and see if we can't get them to, I'm not bullish that we get all the way, but the further we can drag the agency, the better off we're going to be for the next time. And maybe, we do give them 5 years, for crying out loud. Like, maybe we can just ease them in. Maybe we take the first year off.
Yeah, 20%, out of what they say there were for schools 200 and something. We're 80, 70 or 80 done. Then they throw in the private schools. Well, of course, I mean, if they want to be in. They're still children and they need to eat. But 20% of 150 is another 50 to 60 schools. Well, hell, we ought to be able to work them in and go door to door to get the income numbers. I don't know, I may have already told you. When we built our new school in Troy, when I was on the board, there was something about through FHA and federal programs, if you met a certain income threshold or below that, you could get like 50, 70% reimbursement. And the board, I was chairing, but we hired a person in that summer to go to every house in town and not to leave until he had the numbers. And I mean, the federal government basically paid for our schoolhouse in the state. I mean, God, if
And was that your favorite summer job, Bobby? I feel like you were the one who wouldn't leave till the numbers.
He stayed for supper on many occasions.
Well, I wasn't it was one of the school teachers, the phys ed and coach. Of course, he knew everybody and they were all, buddies anyways. And no, I worked slicker than heck. And no, we never spent much money on schools when I was on the board. The Miller formula was in then. And that sucker, I knew that frontwards and backwards and upside down even. I could read that. We got every dime we could get, but new buses, new school, new gym, kindergarten program. Yeah, we did good. But anyways, is there anything else that you'd like to bring up? Tomorrow morning, I'm not sure. Linda, are you on?
Yes.
Did we have farm labor housing tomorrow morning, or were we gone in Gus, or was that for Friday?
That was for Friday, because Michael will be here too. So for tomorrow, as far as I know, you have just follow up on the school bill.
Meal.
Does
And
Jim know that? Because we're looking for an updated draft, right?
yeah, well, just what Ed sends him, I think.
Well, I worry that Ed may not have the giddy up we need.
I'll email them and let them know the hearing is tomorrow at 9.
Terrific, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else that we're bypassing? Or we've got your bill, Chris, the farm machinery repair bill, and we've got Senator Ingalls' bill on that milk taxing or pricing thing that I thought we would, when we come back after town meeting week, we can get started on those. And then Carolyn, we've got a bill that she voted out that was up for action on the House. Well, I think it was
From liability.
Pardon?
It was on agritourism liability.
Yes, and we should get that bill in our committee, but if I need to call Bloomer to get that squared away, but that should come to us and then move on to maybe judiciary. So if there isn't anything else, Anthony?
I don't know if we're ever going to get to this. We had to talk about the sheltering bill a while ago, and then I haven't heard much about it since then. So just want to keep that on our radar.
There there's just some minor changes, right, to that, Anthony?
Yeah, just some changes about weather, about what sort of like declining, defining the weather condition. I don't know exactly what the wording is, but the way it stands right now, basically, you can never let your animals be outside because they might be exposed to wind or rain, that kind of stuff. And it makes it hard to be a grass farmer if you're relying on grass-fed, you raise grass-fed beef or whatever. Your animals have to be outside, even if the weather gets a little balmy.
Well, my
So
wife
there is
has
language
never-
that people have been kicking around. I don't have it with me right now, but there is some language that people are kicking around.
Senator, the House Ag Committee has been working a bit on that.
Okay.
And we can, we've got their miscellaneous bill that's coming. And
Yeah, that's what I thought.
that's pretty wide open to, add, delete, whatever. So I think we're in good shape, but Linda, make sure and put that on our list so we won't forget it. And I think we're rolling pretty good. We've still got that week when we come back that if something pops up during town meeting week, we can address. We've got that week to get stuff out too. So
I just got an email from Gus, who cannot come until 9:45. Do you want to start the meeting then?
On Friday?
Yes.
Well, for 15 minutes, I guess we could, but why not stick with the 9:30 and
9 o'clock.
Michael will come, or Jim, and we can, pardon?
At 9 o'clock, not 9:30. So we'll keep it at 9 o'clock. And then Gus will come at 9:45.
Yeah, we can always do something, I think, but we can always take a break if we get tired.
Okay.
So anyways, are we all set, guys?
Yep.
If we are, we'll see you at 1.